It's nice to see you all in the cinema finally, in person. I'm Manon. I'm the industry program producer at Sheffield DocFest, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this Q&A today. As you can see, we have kind of like short on microphones, so I'm just going to ask Cel and Katriona and Claire to come for the first round of questions. And if any one of you guys have a question during the Q&A, just don't hesitate to drop them on Slido. I think it will come up at some point. Yeah, you just ask on slido.com, you put the code in, and then you just ask your questions. Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you very much. How are you guys?
Good.
First time in Sheffield?
It is.
Great. Just, really thank you very much for just showing up today and just taking the time to answer our questions. I have a lot of notes. I'm just going to read a bit because I'm always very awkward in Q&As. But I kind of wanted to just ask each of you a couple of questions about your film specifically. Going to start with you, Claire, Growing Love. I was wondering, when I was watching the film, I really liked the tone of voice as you're telling the story of growing this plant. And I was wondering, because you're talking to the viewer, but I was did you have someone specifically in mind where you were, because there's this very familiar kind of sometimes a bit hesitant tone that you have, but also the way you deliver is so purposeful and very observant. I think that the comedy of you just being it's a weed was just so perfect. So I was kind of wondering about the writing process around that.
So with the last few works that I've made, I've gone through a process where I have the initial idea and then I write it out as a script type thing, and then I go through that a few times and getting used to the sort of speaking to a microphone in a room type thing, and then I tend to sort of completely get rid of the script and then sort of start recording again, but so I sort of remember certain things from the script, but then I go off on lots of tangents as well, and I just sort of let the voiceover develop in real time. So it's a bit more I like the process of you can hear me think sort of thing, rather than a predefined sort of sentence of something that I'm going to say. So I think that sort of thinking space is really important, for me to get across this, just this sort of sense that I'm exploring it in real time.
And it's really nice to see that I think process is also something that you can see in the film, as in the process of growing a plant, the process of talking about growing the plant. And I really like how how narrated it was, but then in terms of the images, it's the images invoked are more coming through what you're saying than the images that are clearly there and beautiful, but also I didn't think it was a film that was very visually demanding, as in I was really enjoying looking at the image, but really sifting through the voice. Was it can you talk a bit more about that choice of images?
So some of them are from collected mobile phone footage, which I like to include in my work, as well as the sort of personability of it, how it's so sort of connected to you, there's someone directly behind that camera and in often a personal space and everyday life. And it's sort of combined also with more sort of studio-based footage, the footage at the end. But I still want to retain that sort of sense of there being someone there. So I've still got that sort of the sound of the space, or my breath a little bit, to maintain this sort of sense of it being a story about something personal and everyday. So I think with the footage, it's a combination of things I've collected over the years and sort of more sort of planned things directly.
I guess speaking of collecting images on the phone as well, I was thinking of what you did, Katriona, with Vida Villanelle, and I was wondering, when did was it the plan all along from the beginning that when you started to film, to make this film, or was it just you going through videos being actually this is a journey that I want to turn into a film?
Nothing was planned in terms of the filming. It was all just
random bits of footage that I had on my phone, as I'm sure many people do. But I seem to film, we've been talking about this a lot at the moment. I've just constantly got my phone out and I'm recording things. So it was all just stuff like that. Some of it was sent to friends and family, some of it was uploaded to social media. Others, you know, there are kind of these moments where they're kind of things in between the other films that I've made on a proper camera. So there's some kind of repetitions of some of shots from my other films, but it's all on a phone. So they're kind of incidental moments. And then when I was commissioned to make the work, the opportunity came up to look at sort of our changing relationship to home during lockdown. So I edited it between, it was basically summer last year. So after the first lockdown, and it was a reflection of, so half of the footage is in Greece and half of it's in the UK. And that's where I've been based for the last several years, is between these two places. So we go back and forward, following the villanelle format. So the villanelle poem is this like poetic structure with an ABA rhyming pattern and two refrains, which are whole repeated lines. So I thought, how can I use, I really wanted to make a video villanelle, however that would, you know, happen. Like how can you make two images rhyme, and how, you know, if we're going to see these repeating refrains, how can we see them again and again but slightly differently? So I used like moving shots versus static shots, Greece and the UK as the A and the B. So the structure helped me look through basically a load of incidental phone footage taken over 2 years while I was in lockdown and couldn't get back to Greece. So it was kind of, none of it was intentionally, to come back to the original question, none of it was intentionally shot, but there's always kind of in the back of my, it's like a sketchbook, you know, for me, filming on my phone, I guess.
Yeah. And yeah, like I think the rhythm works really, really well, and like I was very like taken by the rhythm of the images and the repetitions and the flow. So like the editing that you did, I think is just really, really great. And how was it to watch it on a screen? Because I know when we discussed you coming to the festival, you showed your piece in the UK before, but it was in an art gallery where you had like an installation. So like, yeah, just wondering how it felt and how you feel about images on like traditional, you know, cinema screen versus this like use now of, you know, of phone formats as well.
Yeah, I was originally intended it to be on a portrait format, either monitor or for people to watch it on their phones, to kind of to keep it in line with how it was made and the objectness of it. So seeing it on the screen, I was quite nervous about seeing it, you know, this scale. And I don't know, I can't answer that question really. I want to hear what everyone else thinks, because it's really strange looking at a portrait format on a very wide screen.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
How do you guys feel about that? But I mean, I'm going to give a bit of space for like questions from the audience, but I just wanted to also hear about you with June, which I was really, really, I felt like I was in the best possible way watching a lot of like visual ASMR when I was watching the pottery. It was like I really struggle with audio ASMR, but just like looking at June making pottery, it was just kind of like, I just want to watch this on a loop. I thought it was very like meditative and calming. And I really think that June's philosophy is so interesting in a world where like we're so disconnected from from the source of what we use on a daily basis, like the things we own. And I just wanted to know a bit more about your relation to June and how you came about to meet him and decide to make this film. Kind of like the journey around your relation.
Yeah, sure. So there's this lovely little cafe in Newcastle called Kiln, and they make their own pots, cups, kind of ceramics, and it was in that studio that they make everything, and then the cafe uses it. They also outsource to other restaurants. I used to go there quite often before lockdown, and I just had the idea of doing a documentary about this person that I would see making the pots and the ceramics and stuff, because the cafe has this lovely kind of glass wall where you can actually watch someone do that. And you could just literally just sit there, have a cup of coffee, and just watch, because it's mesmerizing. And that's something that I really wanted to capture with this film, that essence of sitting and being mesmerized by someone else's kind of craft and work. And so that was kind of always going to be what I really wanted to achieve from this film. So I'm really happy that you said that it was kind of like a visual ASMR, because that's exactly what I kind of wanted. In terms of like kind of going around making it, I knew someone who worked at the bar who put me in touch with Jun, and we had a couple of sit-downs, talk-throughs. I asked him a bunch of questions, tried to get an overall feel of his craft, but also his philosophy, because like I came into this not knowing anything other than what I saw through the kind of the glass pane. So it was very much really trying to get to understand him and his work, and he's got so many interesting thoughts, and every line that he says is in this film is as delicate as his touch when he's making pots. It really is like so much richer than what I thought I was going to make. So yeah, so we had a couple of sit downs, and then had the day where he talked me through each process, and there's quite a lot of processes of how he makes a pot. And I love the fact that he would show me all these different processes, and at the end he would like discard a bunch of stuff he's spent the entire day making, because they weren't quite the right weight or quite the right thickness. So it was very much kind of about that, if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
Cool.
it does. Do you have one of his bowl?
I do.
Hey.
Yeah, he gave
Do
me.
you eat your cereals in the morning? Good. Actually, do you still have the weed as well? Are you still growing it?
No. With that kind of weed, it sort of it does a shedding thing,
Yeah.
where it develops these like crazy, like furry, sort of brown splinter type things, and it goes to seed basically. So it's to spread and get into everyone else's garden.
That would be a bit of a like, hey, I'm keeping the weed, so just watch out. Because, but that's really, really interesting, and just really like how like in each unique way there's like very strong focus in each of your film about like the process of like finding videos on your phone and making a journey out of it, the process of like growing something, the process of making a pot, and like I think like it's really interesting how it brings like forward like something that sometimes you just don't necessarily notice. Like you capture very like short moments that look seemingly insignificant, and you just put them together and they create a travelogue, and you just put in focus a plant that maybe someone would just like not even look at. And this here as well with the pot, it's like, you know, it's not usual like IKEA pot. It's like someone who made something and discarded tens of them because they were a bit too light, and then just like you really see that as well through the camera, and then I really like that. I'm just going to stop blabbering a bit. If anyone has a question, I know we're using Slido, but also if you just want to shout. I'm not going to tell anyone. Yes, hi. Yeah, sure. Do you have time? Do you want to put on the spot?
Happy to.
Good, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names. I can't remember the names I'm talking to. But for the weed, I thought it was quite interesting that you're seeing it as this beautiful planet and you're being told it's just a weed. And I was wondering what the importance of that for you was, for how something like a plant can be seen so subjectively depending on what values and place and how that's important to your film. Shall I?
Yeah,
Maybe,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, I felt like I was holding on to this sort of to the event for quite a while, and I was sort of working through the motions of it and how much I wanted to give away, if you like, within the film, and how much I wanted to directly reference this sort of fact of the subjectivity of the relationship to a plant or a weed, and how much I wanted to leave open to the viewer. So I felt like that this is how the structure evolved in terms of this like big reveal, because I wanted to kind of pass on to the viewer this sort of build up almost to an event in the same way that I felt, because I wanted the viewer to feel this like disappointment thing that I instantly, like this weird sense of disappointment anyway that I felt when my mum said that it was a weed, because, and then how my relationship instantly changed to that object. And so, yeah, I think like I realised the best way to sort of present this story was to almost, to recreate it somehow for the viewer. So that's why I sort of go off down this sort of elaborate, like kind of journey where I'm just talking about the other plant that I had, and then, yeah, like I say, the big reveal towards the end.
And for the next one, I just want to say about the portrait thing. I think what's really interesting about that style is when someone's recording something in the phone, that's how they're experiencing reality for those seconds or minutes, because they're looking at their screen. So it's kind of you're getting a very personal insight into what someone's actual present experience was, which I think is why it feels so personal to watch a lot of phone footage or something on portrait. But all I had to ask was, I really liked the shot where you switching, you like whip panning in the crossroads of a gizzle or an alleyway, and I just wondered, was there any meaning behind that, or was it kind of just random?
It's
Go ahead. I was going to just repeat the question for the audience, but just asking about the specific shot. Were you switching? Sorry, what were you?
So it was like a crossroads and an alleyway.
There's a crossroad and alleyway, and the switching of the camera was really interesting.
Or like the possible routes.
Yeah, and also you were making a comment about how the portrait format is also how like so many people like look at the world at the moment, and like the immediacy of translating that into the phone format, and how it reflects like how also we see a lot of things these days.
Thank you for the comment about the portrait format. It's really useful because it's so hard for me to judge what this looks like to anyone else because I'm so close to this footage, and I've literally been carrying it around in my pocket for years. It's interesting you saying everything looks like that, and when you're filming, but the funny thing is, when you're filming, you've got a small version of that with the entire image that your eyes can capture at the same time, so you've got this like superimposition of a double. But it's interesting because it is a very like personal, close film, but it's all of these shots are like in between events, so things happened over the course of 2 years and between two homes, COVID, Brexit, lockdown, can't be in Greece anymore, so there's a lot of like personal baggage, but you don't see any of it in the shots because it's these small moments in between. So I don't know how that comes across either, but about the Ginnell or the alleyways, the crossroads, that was in the section at the end, which is about lockdown. So that was filmed during lockdown, and I was stuck at my dad's place in the south of England. I was on my way to a film festival in the States and got stuck for 4 months rather than 4 days just outside London, unable to get back to Greece and see my partner, and then unable to be in Northumberland and be with my mum, and it was like just like this really horrible kind of state of suspension, although it could have been a lot worse, really. But so when I found that crossroads, it just felt like where I was at, which was kind of turning round and round in circles, looking in all these different directions. So that's why I edited it in at that moment, because that's this kind of slightly more confused end of the film, I suppose, which is the interruption of lockdown. So the structure of the villanelle is actually broken at that moment, and the lockdown interrupts this pattern of the editing pattern that I used nice. So, thank you.
And I really liked what was his name?
Jun.
June, yeah, sorry. So I really liked what he was saying about how what he was saying about the inevitability of his stuff breaking and how relating it to, I guess, the inevitability of death that we all have as well. So I was pretty interested. I just wondered, did he ever go into more detail about that with you, or what did you think about that, and how did it shape how you constructed the film? Because it's quite a profound thing to say.
Yeah,
Just going to like say for the
Yeah,
live
sure.
audience that you were asking about that comment that June makes about the inability of the ball cracking and breaking and inability of death and how those two relate, and if that was something you had a conversation with June on, like, off camera, that you elaborate a bit more on.
Yeah, we did, but not as kind of in those terms of life and death necessarily. But the way that I kind of see it, a lot of stuff that gets made nowadays, kind of maybe the more synthetic stuff, doesn't have the consideration of an end to that kind of object's life, and it gets discarded, but without a death. So like waste and kind of just kind of like general kind of waste or stuff that gets thrown out and gets into the sea and kind of all the kind of the issues that we're going with today. But with this comment, it was really, for me, it was very much that this ball kind of belongs and is a part of, I guess, supposedly, just like of us, of Earth and stuff like that. We didn't really. I will ask him exactly what he means, because it's a good point. I didn't actually ask him exactly kind of what he meant, because I just interpreted the way that I kind of read it, and for me it's that his like pots and ceramics that get made, they have a destiny in a way, whereas the stuff that gets made today is very, very much for one purpose, and like I said before, there's no consideration of how stuff is disposed. So that's kind of my take on it. Thanks for the question. That's really cool. And I'll let you know if you give me your email, like what he says about it. Yeah.
I think it's nicely open as well. That it'd be interesting to talk. I feel like it'd be interesting to talk to.
Yeah, he's really he's a super interesting dude. Like honestly.
Thank you so much. Is there any other question before we move on to Sama and Alfie? Okay. Well, thank you so much, guys. This is like part 2 of the Q&A. It's a bit awkward, sorry about that, but really just a pleasure to have you on screen and show your work. They're amazing, so thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Big
Thanks.
bravo to them. And would you guys care to come up on stage? Sema and Alfie, thank you so much. How are you?
I am. Oh yeah.
Good. How are you?
You all right?
Yes. Okay, great. And yeah, just to reiterate, if you guys can just really ask question on Slido, because we are live streaming and it's my fault, but we can't really hear you if you're asking the question in person. But yeah, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, guys. Alfie, I was really enjoying this metaphor throughout the project, the film, of hanging by a thread, and I think just you do it in on so many levels in the film, this metaphor, and you do it very well. And first of all, how did the characters of your film felt about just being randomly hang out on were they very receptive to doing that throughout the film, or?
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one, because I guess I had to kind of speak. Well, the story kind of came about through an article in the Yorkshire Evening Post that I saw, and it was kind of from then that I kind of looked at a way of kind of maybe communicating the story and the idea of this community kind of hanging on to their homes kind of came about. And then from then I kind of got the idea of this suspension thing, which I thought was a bit weird at first, but the question of how did I get them up there, I'm not really too sure myself. Like, I mean, some of them, they did want to do it, but some of them didn't really want to do it. And it was a matter of, obviously, with their campaign trying to save their homes, it was like, is this what I've got to do to try and kind of like save myself? But yeah, there was a few, like the woman who went the highest, Jan, was really scared of heights, but she went first, so it was kind of like set the scene for everyone else. But yeah, I think it was just months of kind of working with them, speaking about the project and kind of getting that trust, which was obviously really important to kind of getting this end result on film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still don't really know myself. It was a bit of a miracle, to be honest.
But like I think it works really, really well, and I think that the rhythm of the film really portrays that like suspension. I really like the phone calls where you have like you wait a bit till the person starts talking, and you have all these like shots of like frames and toys and things that seem to be kind of like stuck in time. And it's interesting because I think often there's this image of like those places and what one of the characters says about, well, they're rented and people don't think we have any rights, and they don't necessarily think of those places as like places you would want to stay, but actually, you know, you use like, you know, the birds chirping and this like sense of like a quiet place that just feels very safe and cozy, and someone is just trying to like evict them. And I think it's just really, really powerful the way you film the buildings. And I also like, I think this film is like it's very quiet but also very like politically resonant, and I was just wanting to know a bit more about your position as a documentary filmmaker. And like some people argue that like, you know, you do art for art's sake, but I was watching this film and I was like, well, that's what art can do best, is like to be political and to like raise awareness around something that normally wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely trying to humanise what the situation is going on, because at the minute it is just, they're just seen as a number of people and a tally and a statistic. And the thing is, there's so many little communities around the UK that are currently going through this. I mean, this is only one kind of local story that I kind of saw, and kind of I wanted to kind of shine light on it. But I mean, it's interesting you say it's political. It is political, but I think the film itself is just documenting that. I think the political kind of part of it comes with the conversation that comes after the film.
Yeah.
Because although there's kind of it's like a docudrama, so there are, like you say, the little things in between were just kind of ways to get audiences to listen to the story of what's going on, because I've seen a lot of kind of stories about displacement and housing. It was just finding a different way of telling the story. So by doing that with the suspension and like the kind of drama elements in between. But I don't know, I don't see it as political as such, but I definitely think it's the conversations and what it reignites that we can speak about after that.
Yeah.
Hopefully spotlights that.
Yeah, like it's interesting, and like that's really do not want to, you know, misportray it. I personally was like, oh, I felt it as something, maybe political is a bad term, but more like this, it's very humane, and it's like really focused on like the, you know, the people's humanity and their experience, and in that way it's like about society. So maybe like more.
It was definitely important that it was their voices, and it was like, it wasn't something I was taking away from them. And it's obviously like I when I do my films, I kind of want to stand with the community that I make it with. So I mean, we showed some of them and they did like it, kind of. So that's, for me, was like that's the best thing that could have happened for the film, because that's what we wanted.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you say about like how it's like it's about their voices and their subjectivity, and it's for them. And I think that's also something that I really feel in The Branches I Hope the Roots of Memory, which is about, in both film, like what is at the forefront is the voices of the subject, and it's kind of like both of you are like serving the community that you're talking about. And I thought that was a really like humbling and beautiful position to have as a filmmaker. And yeah, I was wondering would like to know a bit more about your relation to Bradford and your relation to the activists and the communities that you follow in the film. And I thought the layering of voices and how they come together was really interesting. So just like, it seems a bit vague, but I was just really interested in how the form that you use in the film like really shows the communities of Bradford in such a like vivid way, with like all the layers of voices and images.
Yeah. So my relationship with Bradford and the contributors,
So I grew up in Bradford, and there were a couple of the contributors that I actually know quite well, and others that I didn't know at all. And I found them through sort of different kind of, I suppose, different faith groups are quite well connected, and also activist groups are quite well connected. So after being away from Bradford for a few years and coming home, I was very much thinking about, I was thinking about these themes because I'd made a previous film on these themes, and I wanted to expand it into sort of more faith groups and looking at different faith groups and how they differ in their perceptions of faith and peace and activism and how those things cross over. But I was also thinking very much about my relationship with the city and my relationship with the people that I was speaking to. And so that kind of evolved through the process of the film, really. I found quite often that I would be, chatting with my contributors and hearing a bit about their stories and things that they've been involved in the city and outside of the city, and realising that, I'd experienced that too, because I'd been in the city when that thing had happened. And so I was then thinking about, how that event impacted me and how my view of it was different from how they were explaining it to me. So it was quite an interesting sort of process of, I guess, exploring that relationship of those themes, but also where I fit in with the city and with them. And so I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And there's actually there's a sentence that I really like that one of the characters says. I'm just going to read it out loud. That I really like. One of the characters says, "If you don't understand people's history, you can't move too far."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I read it a bit as a very accurate comment of like contemporary issues that we're facing in today's Britain and just more generally. But I wanted to know if that was something that you had time to expand a bit more with the character and how you read that that sentence.
So he was specifically talking about the Gulf War in '91. So that date is sort of mentioned specifically directly after he says that. So. So that was quite a big topic for him, and it was a really pivotal point in his life and his journey, in his faith, and also in his peace work that he does. So and he's also a historian. So again, it was sort of that intersection of those things coming together, and that being a really specific and important thing for him.
That's really interesting. How was you there's a lot of archive and there's all illustration in your film, and I really like the scenes where you have the funnel. How do you call that, a funnel in a building?
The chimney.
And then you have the chimney, and then the roots, and also the work on the archive. So just wondering a bit about how did you work with archives and how did you work with illustration a bit more
that's interesting, because it kind of unfolded as I was going. So I started by doing all the interviews, which were audio only, and then sort of trying to make sense of those. I was very much looking for patterns within what people were saying, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to include a lot of each person. I had 14 people for 8 minutes, so I knew it would be just a little bit from each person. So I was very much looking for patterns. And one of there was two really strong themes that came through in what people were saying. Almost everybody talked about the importance of nature in their lives, either as part of their spiritual practice or as part of just looking after themselves, which was really important for them in their activism and keeping from burning out and that sort of thing. So nature was a really strong part in that. But also there's this cycle of, I guess people talked a lot about their faith feeding their activism and their activism feeding their faith, and there being this cyclical process. And that sort of cycle again of the sort of degradation of the environment, and also nature being so important to them. So that was kind of how those sort of images came about, really. And in terms of using the archives, it just was, I suppose, after I'd created the narrative, just finding the bits that best fitted and reflected what they were saying and how I was interpreting what they were saying as well.
Yeah, they work very, very well, and Sorry, I have questions now. I'm going to stop talking. I have a question for Alfie. How did you actually get the actually, that was the question I asked. Sorry about that. About the participants being in the air, and you didn't answer that question. Sorry, it was too obvious. I had to ask. Sorry if I stole anyone's thunder here. And a question for Sema. Yeah, how did you create those black and white abstract images? I guess, like, how did, like, was it you who were illustrating, or did you get someone, or?
Yes, so I created them. So they're photograms which were created in a dark room. I don't know if I should explain what they are. I don't know if people know what they are. So it's like, so hopefully you know how you'd print a photograph in a dark room with a negative. So it's basically, instead of using a negative, you use an object, and it sort of exposes the paper, like it creates a shadow, basically, like a shadow photo. So those are like stop motion versions of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I made those in a dark room.
Thank you. Any other questions? This is your last chance from Slido.
The quotes which are coming through, they're very quick and almost overlapping. They were overlapping. Was that intentional, sort of, like how quickly these events happen and how quickly we process them and get rid of them?
Just for the live audience, the quotes in the film, there's a lot of, like, overlap sometime where you hear different voices at the same time.
Yeah, so why were they overlapping, basically, and how so that kind of came about from, like, as I was I guess interviewing everybody. I interviewed everybody first and didn't listen back to anything that anyone had said before I came to editing, and so during that was quite an important part of the process, in that I often found that, like, there was one or two snippets that remained in my mind, like, through that. It was a period of about a month of what people were saying. So it's almost like my memories of what they were saying, which sometimes were, I guess, overlapping, or there were a lot of similarities, and so I paired things together sort of in my memory. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that.
Does it answer? Yeah. Great, thank you. Just going back to you, Alfie.
Yeah.
Literally, was it on a crane?
Yeah, we got them. It was like a crane on the estate, and we had to use certain areas. Obviously, some documentaries also are made by individuals, but this was like the collaboration of, like, a massive team. So I can't really take the full credit for that, but it was literally a crane and, like, backing it onto, like, some of the gardens. And we had, like, a stunt team that kind of harnessed the residents themselves. They're not characters or actors. And yeah, pulled them up to the position, and then using visual effects, we kind of got rid of that. But the whole process was kind of new to me and a lot of the team anyway, so it was a massive, like, learning curve. But yeah, they were literally hanging in the air. Yeah.
I think I actually saw the cut before the cranes were erased, so it was really funny to see that difference. But yeah, it's not just for Hollywood, the stunts and the cranes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're kind of, like, running out of time now, and
Yeah.
ouch, Craig. Sorry. Someone is asking if you, like, receive funding for your project. Just in terms of, like, how was it to, like, fund your short film? It's like much like industry question.
Yeah. So we got funding from the BFI Doc Society for this.
Yeah.
They were real supportive throughout the whole process, and they came on board, like, when we kind of had the idea and, like, was kind of getting that together. So yeah, the BFI.
Yeah, so mine was funded by a combination of Bradford Council, Bradford 2025 and Bradford City of Film.
Thank you. Well, I think that's it.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for attending Love in Focus. It was our first year doing this strand, and it was just a real pleasure to get to see all those amazing films. So just thank you very much for being here among us.
Thanks.
Thank you.